Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Dineshwar Sharma, the Centre's Special Representative for Kashmir, on Monday reached Srinagar for a 5-day visit to the state, during which he will hold talks with various stakeholders. Sharma, a former chief of the Intelligence Bureau, will spend 3 days in the Kashmir Valley and 2 days in Jammu, where he will hold talks with Governor N.N. Vora, Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti and various delegations. In Srinagar, he is expected to meet various political leaders, student groups and youth. Sharma has said that he would like to counter false sloganeering and propaganda available online and ensure that youth and students become part of the peace process. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take stock of the interlocutor's visit to Jammu and Kashmir. Joining me on the program today are Sandeep Bamzai, Editor-in-Chief of the Financial Chronicle; Rana Banerjee, former Special Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat; Major General S.B. Asthana, retired defence expert; and we'll be joined on the phone line by Radha Kumar, former interlocutor to Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Sandeep Bamzai, I'd like to begin with you, of course. What do you believe is going to be on top of the agenda as far as Dineshwar Sharma's visit to Jammu and Kashmir is concerned?
I think this is essentially a probe. He will meet various stakeholders. Obviously, the Hurriyat and the separatists are not willing to meet him. So we've seen attempts like this in the past. But I think what is interesting here is that there is a change of tack and a change of strategy. And I think the Home Minister appears to have prevailed. Rajnath Singh ji appears to have prevailed over the Prime Minister and the National Security Advisor, that the Dovell Doctrine might not necessarily be the right one for Kashmir, and that a political dialogue and a political process, both combined, is something that you need. And the expediency for that seems to have resulted in Dineshwar Sharma. Now, look at what was happening. You had a situation where the jackboots returned. Militants, both local and proxies for Pakistan, were being killed. You had a trial balloon on Article 35A, which was exploring a different alternative. And you maintained the democratic process by keeping the alliance or the coalition alive in the valley. All that obviously is not working. And on the eve of Tillerson's visit to India, and let's not forget that that's an important part in this jigsaw, on the eve of Tillerson's visit to India, you have a complete change of strategy after 3.5 years. And you go back to an interlocutor, a dialogue, and a return to a political, some sort of political settlement, which he will explore now that he is there. The fact that over the last 1.5 to 2 years, particularly using Burhan Wani's killing as the cutoff, you actually had the various elements of the Hurriyat coming together, was probably the most dangerous thing that was thrown into relief by all that has happened there. So you have Gilani, Mirwais and Yasin Malik, three completely separate people, part of the separatists, who created a joint resistance front against the government and against the people of India. Now, I'm very clear that anybody who picks up the gun against the country, he has to be eliminated and terminated. There is no remorse in something like this. But at the same time, the alienation of the people is something that only a political dialogue can result in something. There is no other alternative.
Okay, sure. Mr. Banerjee, that's the way forward. You know, two-pronged strategy. Guns should be dealt with guns, but the youth and others need to be dealt with politically.
Yeah, essentially what Mr. Bamzai has said is correct, but I wouldn't put the whole issue in such stark terms of contrast, say, between the Dovell Doctrine or Mr. Rajnath Singh prevailing over it. It's a part of the agenda of governance, did provide for a process of talks with all stakeholders. It was specified in the agreement. Now the government has decided or felt that the circumstances at this point were correct for Mr. Dineshwar Sharma to be entrusted with this very complex and big tasks. It will have to be an exploratory process. He will have to build on the whole thing step by step. and he will have to create space eventually for a political process. It will not be enough to find administrative palliatives. So it's going to be a long drawn and an exploratory process, and he will have to look at what has already been done before. And those were the working group reports and also the interlocutors report, which had given suggestions to address the context of the deep sense of victimhood which prevails in certain sections of the valley at least, and how to address this alienation. Mr. Bamzai also has spoken about the political process being the best way to address alienation. So I think he'll have to take these issues to the forefront in a manner that slowly a consensus could evolve among various political stakeholders to go forward.
Sure. Okay. We'll have to discuss that at length as well, talking about the various stakeholders. We'll get to that in our next segment. But before that, General, as far as the military's presence, the military has taken a more aggressive approach, or so the media has been communicating over the last 3 years or so. Is that the right approach, do you think? Because you've been there, you've seen all that's happened on the ground in Jammu and Kashmir. How is it that we deal with this problem?
You see, we should be looking at the synergized approach. We all want peace in Kashmir. There is no dispute on that.
There's no doubt about that, yes.
And therefore, any initiative taken by the government is always welcome. The military operations are not going to be affected by this. Army chief has already come on air and already said so. I do not visualize NIA operations also getting affected by this. And in fact, I would appreciate more of convictions after the NIA operations. So then it becomes a totally holistic approach. As far as the army part is concerned, army's role is to create conditions for smooth functioning of the government. So long we have been able to kill 138 militants this year, out of which almost 38 of LET, that is the foreign grown militants. Then similarly, I would say that the conditions are being created in a manner that the dialogues could progress. Now, if we have to fight in the kind of proxy war which the narrative is being written by the opposite side, then everybody has to get together. So in that context, as far as the hard power is concerned, that is also required. It has to be in the soft gloves, that is also required. Similarly, when we fight operations, it's easy to say that it's bullets are not the answer. I totally agree with it. But definitely when we fight the operations, we are not hitting anybody. The innocent part is also there in our heart. The kind of activities which we have done, whether it was for floods or otherwise, and even during the normal operations, I must tell you that anybody in whose house the militant has been found last night, we presume that he is an innocent still, even if he has not given us information. The reason is very simple. He comes and tells us very simply that, sir, maximum if I don't give you information, maximum you will try and extract it from me, but you will leave me alive. If I give it to you, these militants are going to kill me. So therefore, and not only me, but the entire family.
Family, yes.
So if that be the case, then I have a very awkward choice, and therefore I would like to go ahead with the way I do. And therefore he is an innocent, because if I am placed in his place, that absolutely I would do the same perhaps. So that is the way. And now when I am emphasizing time and again on synergy is, the people are being killed, the policemen are being killed, and in insurgency operations and in proxy operations, people are the center of gravity. The moment people get alienated, definitely the swing is towards the other side, and the militants will slowly lose the sheen.
Okay, fine. All right. So synergy is what you're emphasizing and you're stressing on. Let's see if that happens going forward. But let me bring in former interlocutor to Jammu and Kashmir, Radha Kumar, into the picture. Now she joins us over the phone line from Kodaikanal in Tamil Nadu. Dr. Kumar, you know, what is the biggest challenge for the new interlocutor as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned?
I think that his biggest challenge is trying to ensure that red lines are not set prematurely. We've seen some rather confused speeches. Prime Minister Modi says that gale lagao और ना गोली से चलेगा पर dialogue से चलेगा. The new special representative is appointed, but then we also hear the reaction to Mr. Chidambaram, which is comparing autonomy to azadi and implying that even autonomy will not be on the table for talks. So some clarity is required. If you take autonomy off the table, then you cannot expect the dissidents to talk to you. Not that dissidents would talk if you put autonomy on the table, at least they wouldn't talk openly about it. But you have to, if you want to attract them, you have to say that at the moment, all issues are open for discussion.
Okay.
Then you slowly narrow down to what can be accepted.
Okay, so that's the biggest challenge you're saying, because there are different narratives coming from different sections of the society, and that's a problem going forward. You know, Sandeep Bamzai, we spoke about various stakeholders, you know, and like Radha Kumar just pointed out, you have different voices coming from across the board. So, I mean, how do you take it forward? How do you synergize? How do you put all this together and deal with the problem? I know it's a complex problem. Yeah. But how do we deal with it?
See, let's understand that there are three geographical areas that make up the state of
That's
J&K.
also a factor.
Okay? There is a Hindu division, there is a Muslim division, the Hindu division being Jammu, the Muslim division being the valley, which is 135 miles by about 32 miles or so. And then there is Ladakh and Leh, which is the Buddhist. So these are linguistic, religious and geographical divisions, all in one state. And remember, this is a truncated state. The actual state was bigger than France on October 26, 1947. But since it's become much, much smaller because of various reasons. We're not going there.
Yeah.
So the strategy that was employed till now, and that's the point that Radha Kumar is also highlighting, was of course confused because you had various things happening at various times. The problem was South Kashmir. There was even the possibility of South Kashmir and at least 5 or 6 districts, Shupia, Pulwana, etc., which were going to be declared as liberated zones by the militants. So at that particular point in time, sending the jackboots in was crucial. They have succeeded in turning the tide as far as killing militants is concerned, targeting militants is concerned, and specifically slaying various members of the Hizbul, etc., on the ground. Then, of course, there is a larger operation because Kashmir is your crown jewel and it has an international border and an LOC with Kashmir. And because the security structure goes deeper and deeper into a concentric circle which comes from the LOC right up to Srinagar, which is the epicenter of the valley. So, alienation is something that you have to deal with politically. Now, the other problem is you have a chief minister who is practicing soft separatism, who has mainstreamed militants, and you have the extreme right wing of the polity in India coming together and forging a coalition. So when the extreme right of India and the extreme right of Kashmir politics comes together, it's a marriage made in hell. Again, we have allowed that to carry on despite Mufti's death, and then this lady not taking a call and then finally jumping in and continuing with the coalition. So there are lots of moving parts to this equation, and while there is no rocket science attached to the fact that you need a political process and it is expedient that you have to resolve this politically and through dialogue, everything else carries on. But what is that political process? It has to be autonomy.
Okay.
It has to be autonomy. And in parallel, you have to abrogate Article 370 and you have to ensure integration of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and in parallel mobility. You have to move people from the what is the single biggest problem? Article 370 and Article 35A specifically don't allow anybody other than a state subject to take up residence or buy property, etc. Permanent residency is what Article 35A is.
Yes.
Now, when you are not allowed mobility, how will you get integration? And again, the same problem is with the Kashmiri Muslim in the valley, which is that he has an existential issue. He has an identity problem. Should he align with Hindu India at the moment? Should he retain his Kashmiri identity? Should he talk about Azadi and think of Pakistan? But I'll tell you from my own visits to the valley, from my own experiences, and I am a Kashmiri Pandit myself, I speak the language, they know one thing, that Hindustan chhodega nahi. Please be very clear. Hindustan chhodega nahi. Pakistan is not an option. So everything else is not available. I'm sorry, it is NA. You have to integrate with this country.
Okay.
That is the only way forward.
Okay,
and
fair
for that, the center has to talk autonomy.
Okay, the centre has to talk autonomy is what you're suggesting. You know, Rana Banerjee, there are several issues that have been raised by Sandeep Bamzai and the previous speaker, Radha Kumar, as well. You know, do you believe that approaching all of these issues at once is the solution, or should we take these issues one by one and then try and put them out of the way?
No, you can't approach them all at once, neither can you put them all away. It has to be an incremental process. If we look back at the interlocutors' report, they had divided their approach into 4 issues: political, economic, social and cultural. I think we have to revisit that concept and then go forward. On the political side, they had talked about setting up a constitution committee, which would look at all these issues, Article 370, and I don't believe that the abrogation is an answer. Giving it permanent status is an answer, is the way to go.
Yes.
Similarly, Article 35, the present debate is not very helpful. The affidavit which the government has given does not dispel the notion among Kashmiri Muslims particularly that the authorities that are presently in power are allowing the majoritarian narrative to gain ground, which is again not very helpful. The third thing they advocated were regional committees which would be empowered both financially and administratively. And finally, they had also talked about a judicial commission to go into the graves issue, the missing persons issue. Now, all these ideas have to be tackled by the new special representative eventually for the political process to develop any credibility. So, this will have to be a slow process. It can't be all announced or done or even given, responses right in the beginning. At the moment, the Hurriyat have sort of outrightly rejected. But if they find that Mr. Sharma, and by all accounts, he has a very good reputation. So if he is able to gnaw away at, all the, barriers of non-acceptance slowly, you might find the Hurriyat revising their position. In fact, it's very important what Dr. Radha Kumar has said about not getting entangled into red lines of our own with the new government. They should not have any red lines. They should have a flexible process. And there, of course, the Home Minister has been saying that no boundaries have been specified. It is all for Mr. Sharma to, enunciate as he goes along.
But within the 4 walls of the constitution of this country.
Of course.
Yes, of course.
Please understand that that is the only way forward. There is no other way.
There is, okay, all right. General, as far as the military is concerned, how can the military help to better the situation in Kashmir? Because we've seen that the cordon and search operations are back in the valley once again after a gap of almost 15 years. Do you believe that that is only complicating the situation, or that is a necessity when you're dealing with issues as complex as those that prevail in the valley?
Firstly, it's a necessity. You need to have a counter-insurgency grid, because that grid and permanency of that grid to some extent gives you the intelligence. All military operations, unless you have proper intelligence, they are not that successful. So that is one requirement. Secondly, I'll slightly differ. My co-panelist talked of talking to Hurriyat. Now, as far as I am concerned, I would take it that they are not a stakeholder. Separatists are separatists. I am given to understand that Mr. Sharma is planning to have certain councils and able to redress, and he is more on the redressal mechanism. And therefore, he is going to meet a number of delegations. So, that is perhaps the way which I would like to look at. If Hurriyat wants to talk, whether Hurriyat has said that okay, they will not talk, let's not give them that kind of weightage. Separatist is a separatist. We know they are all taking money from Pakistan, and we know what they are doing. So if he has to talk, he should be talking purely and squarely as a resident of Kashmir to the interlocutor, and he should not be given any status more than that. That is my take on.
But is that easier said than done?
No, it is easier said than done. The question is, you have to make up your mind.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
You have
All
to
right.
make up your mind.
Okay. Dr. Radhakumar, you spoke about red lines in your opening comment about how we should be careful not to go there already with your mind decided. But, as far as the stakeholders are concerned, you have the National Conference already saying that there is nothing concrete that is going to come out of this visit of Dineshwar Kumar to Jammu and Kashmir. Then you have the separatists saying that they are not going to talk. So basically everyone else has already has their minds made up. So isn't it a difficult situation for Dineshwar Sharma to be in on the outset?
We encountered very much the same attitudes when we were appointed.
Mm-hmm.
I recall that the PDP, in fact, Mehbooba Mufti, said that nothing could come out of our dialogue. And yet, when our report was published, the PDP were one of the few parties who welcomed it, saying that there were some elements of their own self-rule document that was in our report. So I think the mainstream political parties will talk. Now comes the other question: can you establish the conditions for the dissidents to talk? Whether it is the Hurriyat or the JKLF or the Tehreek or what they now call the Joint Resistance Leadership, ultimately they will have to be on board any solution. Mm-hmm. Because without that, the solution will not hold. We should remember that they have participated in talks, both Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh. So we should not rule out the possibility that they will come on board. Now, if I may continue, I think Rana Banerjee did a better summary of our report than I would be able to do, and I thank him very much for that. And I agree with him that, of course, processes are incremental. Moreover, my impression from the public statements that Mr. Sharma has made is that his intention also is to begin with very important confidence-building measures on the ground, which will have to comprise both human rights reforms and governance reforms.
Right.
And that he is going to try to monitor and ensure that reforms are taken in real time. That will build up the atmosphere for a political dialogue to start.
Sure.
Having said that, I do believe that there are things, elements in both our report and in the working group report that can be implemented. You do not need to discuss them again.
Okay.
You already have enough of an agreement on them that you can start that implementation. And our own experience was that as we worked towards human rights reforms and got them implemented in terms of release of first-time stone-pelting offenders and so on, confidence on the ground developed and more people came forward to talk to us, including many of the second-rung dissidents.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So confidence building measures is the key going forward is what you're suggesting. Yes, Sandeep Bamza, you had something to add.
No, I'm just saying that from the time that Professor Kumar visited the valley as an interlocutor and the report was submitted, I think things have changed dramatically and radically. And the word radical is probably the operative word here. Religious Islam has been replaced by political Islam in the valley. The cold pipes of the internet have done grievous damage with the inhabitants of the valley, particularly the youth. And this political Islam, I think, is what really needs to be cauterized here and now. And I think somebody like S.M. Sahai, who in the past had stamped out militancy, local militancy in Kashmir Valley, his brains could be picked for something like this, and he understands the valley. He understands the online surge for political Islam, and the youth are hungry in Kashmir for online political Islam, and that is how they've been radicalized. And that is the single biggest change from the last time when a political dialogue of some sort was thought of. This time there is a change. The other big change is that you had 3 factions in the Hurriyat.
Yes.
Now they're one. Gilani, Mirwais and Yasin Malik, who is a incidentally of Air Force personnel, Indian Air Force personnel, they are now one, and they represent a joint resistance front, which is now the Hurriyat. These are 2 very, very big seminal changes from the time the last attempt was made with representatives and interlocutors, etc.
Right. I've got 2 minutes left on the program, so I'm going to ask my other remaining panelists to be brief. You know, Mr. Banerjee, do you believe now that the onus is on Dineshwar Sharma to come out with some kind of, to enhance the dialogue process and come out with a solution really for this problem?
Well, as he said himself, he doesn't have a magic wand. And the thing about radical Islam, that's very, very dangerous, as Sandeep has said. And to reverse that process will need time. But it will also need, tackling at the social media level itself, which can be done by other sophisticated methods. And I think Mr. Sharma is well aware of the dangers that this poses, and he would be using some stratagems to counter this narrative.
Sure.
So it will take time. It won't happen very quickly.
It won't happen immediately. It will take time is what you're suggesting. General, your closing comments on the program.
Okay. Firstly, it has to be an incremental approach, 35A and thereafter 370. Secondly, timing is very important. Now, 35A, government wanted 6 months, 8 weeks have been given, and winters start. The moment the winters start, crowd management, all the paid crowd managers of Pakistan, they find it very difficult to engage, get the crowd, and thereafter get the rallies, get into that rally mode, etc., etc. So, crowd management is difficult in winters and harvesting season.
Sure.
So, timing is very important, and I would love that.
I wish the same thing had happened last winter.
Okay.
I wish we had done what we are doing now. Last winter. Those 3-4 months were wasted. That was a period that could have really been used.
Let's not look back. Final closing comment from Radha Kumar. Close the show for us, please.
I would first of all say that I don't agree with Mr. Bamzai that there is a radical difference in the situation. Matters were very grave when we went. What I would say is that there is a huge difference of degree. If things were ugly and issues of radical Islam were taking root when we were there, it is much, much, much worse, multiplied by about 10 times.
All right. On that note, then, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.